The story you are about to witness is one of a bloody struggle for independence, one of death and destruction, sadness and grief, but one of brief life and happiness. This is the story of Ireland in 1641. Resulting from its conquest by England in the late 12th century, Ireland by the early 17th century remained a poor agrarian nation, subservient to their English masters in the realms of wealth and politics. The Irish, working as farmers to produce wheat and other grains to remain on the land of their ancestors, struggled under the high tax and interest burdens imposed by the English government and the English administration in Ireland. Unabashed, the Irish continued their agrarian Catholic lifestyle in defiance of the punitive non-attendance fines and the threat of forced deportation. However, a new threat to the Irish arose in Ulster under the development of the English plantation system. Dispossessed of their land by the intruding English and Scots, the Catholic Irish and Old English found themselves at odds with the new Protestant leadership, which tended to favor the economic interests of the Protestants over their own. Unhappy with the scheme, there is significant evidence of discontent among those Catholics who had become proprietors, and who had become part of the political nation within the politics of Ulster in the preceding 30 years period of time, Professor Nicholas Canny. As they were excluded from governing and protecting their interests by the new Protestant settlers, the gentry feared for their wealth and way of life, which had been previously protected by the Parliament in Dublin, but with slim and growing Protestant majorities in the Privy Council and the House of Commons left only the House of Lords to block legislative decisions. With Thomas Wentworth in the executive position of Lord Deputy, the gentry had little hope of retaining their land in Ulster or Munster, as the tyrannical Lord Deputy composed grand schemes for the gradual expansion of the plantation system across the island. The Irish of Ulster and Munster were left with little hope of economic survival, as they were banned from renting or utilizing any of the lands defined as Ulster plantations under Protestant rule. They were left without means of sustenance and sustainability. These peasants, exiled from their homeland, would wait for the influential noblemen to take action to protect their personal interests. The situation in England, however, had become extremely vitriolic with the Scots, Parliament and the monarch, Charles I, struggling to control the political environment. This conflict would award the Irish with the opportunity they needed to break free of colonial control. By early October in 1641, the Irish and Old Catholic gentry of Ulster specifically were preparing to launch their assault on the landowners. Unable to prompt the remainder of the island to rise with them and take the fortified port cities, the revolt was initially confined to the efforts of the Ulstermen to oust the English from power. The leaders of the rebellion, including Lord Phelan O'Neill, were often wealthy planters who had found themselves deeply indebted monetarily to the English government. This rebellion was their only chance to reclaim the land that had been confiscated from them and default on the massive debt they owed the government. Early in the morning of October 23, 1641, the Irish rose, shocking the Protestant inhabitants of Ulster and quickly taking the cities of Charlemont and Dugannon from the English settlers. These two fortified cities would prove essential in the eventual conquest of Ulster, and while the strike gave warning to the larger cities of Belfast, Armagh, and Down, the revolt spread into the surrounding counties and cities with astounding speed. With the rise of the Ulster Irish peasants to the cause of the Gaelic lords, the anger and hatred held against them by the English and Scots, who had come to inhabit the island with the native Irish, spilled out into alarming bloodshed. Upon the notification of the Protestant authorities in Dublin, the government quickly dispatched Protestant armies under Charles Coote with the intention of driving the rebels out of power in Ulster, to prevent a general massacre of all English and Protestant inhabitants. William St. Ledger, 1641. However, as the concurrent historian Leland remarked, the favorable object of the Irish governors and the English Parliament was the utter extermination of all the Catholic inhabitants of Ireland. Their estates were already marked out and allotted to their conquerors, so that they and their posterity were consigned to inevitable ruin. The Irish responded with equally destructive brutality, robbing and looting the estates of the wealthy English plantation owners, often murdering those who resisted. The Protestants of Ulster were left with no choice but to flee Ulster for the fortified cities that lined the coast relatively impenetrable to the current state of the Irish army. With the continued successes of the nobles in the north, the island followed their revolutionary leaders in the revolt against the crown. A group of English Catholics who sided with the Irish stated, "We rise for our religion. They hang our priests in England." With the Catholic population united in their cause to drive the Protestant English from Ireland, there seemed to be little hope for the settlers who would have to endure without the assistance of the crumbling English government. O'Neill's announcement that the revolt in Ireland was sponsored by the Crown caused an uproar against King Charles I, who had in fact been sympathetic to the Irish cause, in England prompting the English Civil War. As atrocities on both sides continued well into the rebellion, the government in Dublin began to enumerate exacerbated charges against the Irish. According to one James Shaw, during the time he, this deponent, was so restrained and stayed amongst the rebels, he observed and well knew that the greatest part of the rebels in the country of Armagh went to besiege the castle of Aughur, where they were repulsed, and divers of the rebels O'Neill slain, in revenge whereof the grand rebel Sir Phelan O'Neill gave direction and warrant to one Malmurray MacDonald, a most cruel and merciless rebel, to kill all the English and Scottish men within 3 parishes aforesaid, whereupon that bloody rebel with his soldiers most cruelly murdered within a musket shot of this deponent's own house 27 men of Scottish and English Protestants, and left them lying there, when this deponent, to the great hazard of his life, and by the assistance of 2 of the said Turlough O''s servants, commanded by said Turlough to assist him, buried them all, not daring to carry them to the church or churchyard. And he, the said Malmurray, and his soldiers had also murdered this deponent and his family, as this deponent is verily persuaded, but that they were rescued from him by the said Turlough O'Neill, and afterwards protected by the said Sir Phelan, with English troops removed from Ireland to support either the King of Parliament. The authorities in Dublin had little power to cease the now island-wide revolts. By 1642 in Ireland, the island, for the first time since the efforts of Brian Boru, was united under a native banner, under the guise of the Catholic Confederation of Kilkenny. Governed by the Catholic clergy and landed Irish elite, the island was still not fully united under the new order. With the fortified port cities firmly in Protestant hands, the Confederation was free to control the rich farmlands that had only a year ago belonged to the Protestant ascendancy. Events in England, however, began to turn the favor against the new Irish nation. King Charles I, under pressure from both the Parliament and the Scottish Covenant, a portion of which had unsuccessfully tried to quell the revolt in Ireland, was beginning to suffer from a lack of popular support, and his army began to crumble. He turned to the new Irish state for aid. Ultimately, alienating his remaining supporters, the Irish unwisely allied themselves with the very state that had suppressed them for so long, and with the king relatively powerless, he was unable to assist the new Confederation. The new Confederation, a beacon of the tenets of Irish culture, committed to protecting the new Irish state and its citizens, but even with aid from the Papal States, France and Spain, all eager to see England fall at the hands of the Catholic government. As it had received a substantial amount of arms and monetary assistance from these great European powers, the Confederation was able to control the island, eliminating Protestant guerrilla outposts over a 6-year period. In England, the defeat of the monarchical army led the force to flee the now friendly Ireland and travel north to Ulster to reinforce the main Irish force, taunting Parliament to invade Ireland. After the final routing of the monarchical forces in England, Oliver Cromwell led his new model army to Ireland to complete his conquest of the English realms. He arrived victorious from his campaigns in England and Scotland. His army, a deadly combination of artillery and heavy cavalry, was perfectly suited to fight the Irish infantry and a network of fortified towns and cities across the island. Utilizing a siege tactic against the Irish cities, the Gaelic forces, operating mostly without the aid of the Royalist forces that had preferred to remain hunkered down in the north, were shocked at the rapid destruction of their fort system. Unable to stand up to the assault of the English infantry, the Irish-held towns in the south quickly fell to the onslaught of mortar and shells launched by the English artillery. Cromwell, refusing to spare the barbaric rebels, completely slaughtered the defenders as they attempted to flee north to Ulster. As the new model army raced north, the alliance with the Royalists crumbled as the majority of the force defected into the Parliamentary army, leaving Ulster to stand on its own. It was at this time that the rumors of the massacres began to greatly exaggerate the number of Protestant deaths in the rebellion. Numbers, originally improperly estimating the number of Protestant murders and deaths to be about 3,000, quickly ballooned to 300,000 deaths with Cromwell's urging. Infuriating the English armies against the Irish defenders, the new model army continued their march into Ulster, murdering innocent Catholic peasants with a cruel brutality. Marching on the final Catholic stronghold, specifically the main stronghold in Cavan, Cromwell showed little mercy to the Irish, executing anyone guilty of conspiring with the rebels, as well as scores of Irish clergy and peasants. Thousands were deported to the new English colonies to work as indentured servants, and the remaining Irish in Ulster and Munster were deported en masse to Connaught, arguably the poorest province on the island, due to widespread land infertility and poor wealth conditions. The population of Ireland was estimated to have fallen anywhere from 15 to 83% from 1649 to 1653 under the combined stresses of famine, mass murders, and systematic execution of the Irish populace. The actions taken by Cromwell and his successors would facilitate the Irish potato famine in the mid-1800s and restrain Irish political gains until the 1900s.